Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Healthcare Tech Lunch Talk. I am so excited to have a very special guest today, my friend Tracy Clark. Tracy is an executive coach, an amplifying coach for visionary leaders. She's also an award winning coach. Tracy won two Awards. She was also She has the Coaching Executive of the Year and the Team Coach Exec of the Year. Welcome to the show, Tracy. So happy to have you here.
Thank you, Nadia, for inviting me. Firstly, it's an absolute honor to be here with you and to be able to talk about leadership, which is close to my heart.
That is great. In your own words, Tracy, how would you introduce yourself to our audience?
I would say that I work with visionary founders who really want to challenge the status quo. And what I do is I help them multiply their potential, their profit, and their impact. So that's my aim, is to work on the three sides so that we create an exponential ripple effect.
That is awesome. And before we start, I'd love for the audience to type in whether they're watching us live or they are watching us on the replay. You can put either live or replay. You can also put where are you connecting from. Are you which state or which country or which municipality you're connecting and watching us from. It's always exciting to see how small the world is.
It really is. And I think LinkedIn really shows that, doesn't it? It enables us to have that global reach.
Exactly. So, Tracy, leadership. We think of leadership as leading others. And a lot of people, when they think of leadership, they think of them leading a team, leading a company. When I met you, I learned about self-leadership. Can you elaborate on that and how transformative that is?
Absolutely, Nadia. And I think that is just such a key misconception that we have, and a common one, that leadership is about really leading others, as you said. But what I've come to see is that actually it all starts with us, because we have that ripple effect. So when we get to understand ourselves, to upgrade our identity, and to become conscious of our impact, then we understand the ripple effect we're having, and we're then able to amplify our effect and really amplify the right effect as well. I think that's key, because what I see is that many leaders think they're having a certain impact, and actually a positive impact, when accidentally they might be causing diminution. So what we want to do is just put that mirror up, connect to who we are, is the type of leadership we're embodying in line with the vision that we want to execute. And as I say, understand ourselves.
That's awesome. I'm curious, how frequent is that misconception between leading others versus leading self among leaders that you help?
I think it's very common, but what's wonderful, Nadia, which sort of resonated when we talked, was as soon as I say, well, it starts with you, there's automatically the penny drops and they go, oh my goodness, of course. And then they're open to really going on this process. And I think also, Nadia, I was really thinking about the title that you picked, which is so poignant, about uncertain times. And when you realize that it starts with you, it's empowering, and it gives you that sense of certainty that actually I can make a change because it starts with me.
Yeah, and that's very, I picked that title because for entrepreneurs and business owners, they're facing uncertainty, even without the uncertain economic environment, because by default, they are taking higher risk than other people. And with that higher risk comes uncertainty. So learning how to lead yourself through that, I think it's very critical.
Absolutely. And I think also, for many founders, if it's a first time, there's going into that unknown. There's the fear of failure, which most of us don't like. And, when you're really being disruptive, like the founders that I work with, they're visionary. They're coming up with technologies a lot of the time that are groundbreaking. they've never been done before.
Yeah.
So there's a degree of uncertainty, excitement, but uncertainty there. And what I find is that then in their minds, they start to get that little chatter that says,
Yes.
oh, but can you do it? And then the
Mm-hmm.
imposter comes up.
Yeah.
And that is where the leadership of self is so important, is to realize, yes, we are going into the unknown.
Yeah.
But understand those dynamics, those feelings that are going to come up, that voice that is going to come up inside you.
Yeah. I used to call that imposter syndrome, but not anymore. It's more like a phenomenon that is a natural process that comes along with being in your growth zone. You're outside of your comfort zone and changing your mindset that this is part of the process. This is part of the journey, part of growth. It really is empowering.
It really is. And I love that distinction from syndrome to phenomenon. And one of the things I say to my clients is, if you're feeling a bit of imposter, celebrate it. Because actually it means you're going into the unknown, you're going to be disruptive, and just think about that growth. And that impact that you're going to have.
Yeah, you tapped into fear of failure. And I recall a while back last year, I polled, the audience about, what would be the most valuable thing that I can help you with for entrepreneurs and founders and business owners. The number one was the imposter. A lot of people, especially high achieving and professionals, it's there, and learning how to deal with that is key. To recognize when it's creeping in, that it's okay, it's part of the process. You acknowledge it, but you don't let it stop you.
Absolutely. And that doesn't surprise me at all that it was such a something that people wanted to learn about. And one of the areas, Nadia, that I do a lot of work with, which I think is slightly different from many, is I work a lot on what I call identity and who you're being. Because as we've gone through school, we've gone through university, in your case, you've got a PhD, your identity could be grounded in being more of an academic, or whatever it is for the person. Sometimes I find founders I work with have worked in a corporate and they don't have the identity of being a founder. So that imposter comes up. So what we do is we become very intentional about defining who they're being. Really describing that identity that they're going to be embracing and embodying. And then taking it down a level and saying, okay, this is who you are. What are the assumptions? And that identity needs to be aligned with the vision of the company that you're creating, or the impact you're creating. And then you're thinking from there, rather than looking up and seeing it a long way away. And then when we've created that identity, we then dig deeper into, so what are the assumptions that, let's take you, Nadia, who has the business, who's thriving and worldwide recognition and turning over 100 million. What are the assumptions that Nadia makes? And then naturally we're shifting our thinking.
And I totally relate to this, like I wouldn't say mindset shift, but recalibration. When you are a technical person and you move into a corporate, world, and you move to the entrepreneurial and the business world, the level of uncertainty is amplified. And you really need to reconnect at the deeper level. What drives you? And that will help you, determine what other people, what drives them too. And that in turn will help with retention, with attracting talent, with motivating your team too. And I know you have a beautiful illustration about, how deep you can go. Can you tell us more about that?
I'll share that in just 1 minute. I think for me, as I say, it's grounded in identity, because that's the core of who we're being. And it's really being intentional and detailed on the specifics of it. Because I loved a word that you brought up there, the retention. So I talk to a lot of my founders about being a talent magnet. What if in this identity, where you're this founder creating this impact, you're also a talent magnet where people come to, experts in their area come and say, I want to work with Nadia. Because I know I'm going to grow. I know it's going to be the most sensational journey. So that just gives an example of how intentional we can be about that shift. And we're literally thinking from that place every day. And it does take time to shift the identity.
Yeah, I agree with that. Moving from chasing opportunities to attracting opportunities when you are aligned at a deeper level with your authentic self. And then you're going to attract the right people and repel the wrong ones. And that's what you want, because it's a journey with a lot of ups and downs. So it's better to go through that journey with people that align with their vision, with their mission with you.
Completely. And I love the word authentic that you've just used there, Nadia, because when I'm talking about identity, people often say to me, but I need to make sure it's me. I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah.
This identity that we're creating is literally a next level of you. And this process that we go through really enables you to reconnect to your authentic self, to your values, to your priorities, and reconnect to that vision and why you're doing it.
Yeah. And if I may touch on some point about being your authentic self, is in many cases, what we think is the one thing that's holding us back, when you embrace it and you reconnect with that authentic self, it's actually a big differentiator. It's a superpower when you know how to tap into that authentic self.
Absolutely. And I think, it's a journey, isn't it, of self-awareness as well. And I mentioned to you, I do a lot of work around the Enneagram.
I know that Enneagram. Do you have that?
I do know. I've actually got it under my.
Behind the scene for our audience. Yeah, let me put you on screen.
But this is absolutely transformative tool that I use. Because rather than, I find that a lot of these personality tools box you. What this does is it allows you to take yourself out of the box. And so when we're doing the identity, what we're doing is we're looking at the version of you who will have created the results. And then we're coming back and just going, okay, let me understand where I am now. Let me understand my motivations, why I do what I do, what my triggers are, what my blind spots are. So we're enabling you to grow and expand. And that's why I love that tool.
Can we give an example, let's say, of a technical founder who is an expert on the technical side? Where would they fall on that?
They would fall on. If we
let me go back. Yeah, let me go put you back on.
Okay, they would fall down here. Oopsie, my finger's going the wrong way. Here to the 5, probably. The quiet specialist. So what we have when we do the report, we find that we predominantly resonate with one number, and that might well be what the technical specialist would resonate with. And one of the key characteristics is that they want to understand everything.
Yeah,
which is fantastic in lots of ways. But then when you're growing a business, can you see that there are lines? So we're always looking at how do we grow. Sorry,
grow. You're good.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way. 5. Sorry, I'm going to have to look at it. 5 to 7. We're looking there at we want to tap into the visionary. So this gives you a perfect example of it. It gets you to understand what you're good at, but also what might in some ways be
A blind spot.
splintering you or a blind spot. And then it enables you to honor that, celebrate that, and then also either hire people in that complement you, or, which I believe we all grow, is we can encourage you just to lean a little bit more into the visionary and go, okay, let's just play a minute with what's possible. What else might be possible?
Yeah.
And that's what I love doing with founders, is getting them to play and say, let's just have some fun. And what I find is it just unlocks new waves of inspiration and energizes people.
That's awesome.
That's why I spend a lot of time on the person. And I can share the slide that you mentioned, Nadia, because it's so pertinent. And maybe I'll just explain the backdrop to this this analogy. So I came across recently a project called the Biosphere, which you might well have heard about in Arizona. And the idea of that project was to develop. Oh, sorry, my dogs are just going to bark.
It's okay. You can put him on your lap if that helps.
No, that's fine. Was the idea of that project was to develop a perfect lush garden in the middle of Arizona, which, as you know, is a desert. And so they created this beautiful biosphere with what they thought were the perfect conditions for these trees to grow. And the trees grew, and they grew to a certain level. And then they found they just fell over. And they became really perplexed by this. They were like, we've created the perfect environment. The trees are there. The soil's amazing. Everything's good. But why are they falling?
Yep.
And what they found, what they realized, was that outside in the real world, there are external challenges, such as wind.
Yeah.
What happens with the wind is when the wind blows, it forces the tree to deepen and strengthen its roots. So as the roots strengthen, it then provides more of a foundation for the trunk to grow. The trunk then becomes more solid and more stable, which enables the branches to grow further out and more fruit to blossom. And I like to use this analogy of the tree really to reflect that actually when we look at us, we need to develop our roots. And what I find is most expert advice is telling you to sharpen your strategy, take more action, talk to your teams more, just brainstorm. And it's very external. It's what I define as, from the image here, as a habit, strategy, and action. And that is where the trees in the biosphere were focused on. They were growing, but then when they grew to a certain height, they were too heavy and the tree fell over. So my perspective is, my different approach is, let's lead ourselves and let's be intentional about deepening these roots, deepening our identity, clarifying it, our mindset, our values. And when these roots become deeper and stronger, then when the wind blows, which it will blow, like a no from a client, a rejection, or a recession, or whatever it is, when that metaphorical wind comes, you're grounded, you've got your strong roots, and you can come back and keep going. And what I find is that as we deepen these roots in our identity and our mindset, it's not that the strategy and the action aren't important. They are. It's just you develop an even more effective strategy and you take even more impactful action. So my view is, start with the roots, start at the source of being, and then it creates the ripple effect. And then the tree will last for decades and even centuries, which is what we want for our businesses. Most founders that I work with want to create that legacy. They want to be the role model for their children. And this formula allows them to have that multiplier effect.
That's awesome. That I love this analogy for the tree and the roots. And we growing up, my parents, they're always, make sure your roots are deep.
Yes.
This way, whatever conditions you're at, you're going to sustain
Mm,
those variable conditions, because there will be changes. There will be, curveballs that are thrown at you. And
mm,
having those like deep values, that deep identity, that like strong mindset, it's going to take you through weather those storms. And that brings us to the uncertainty component,
mm.
because besides being in entrepreneurship where you have, let me take this one out so we can go back to
Yeah.
big view. And so when you have that uncertainty as an entrepreneur, it's already putting a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah.
Now add to that the economic environment, describing those conditions above the ground that you're referring to. Any tips that would help the entrepreneurs in current environment to weather those, downsides, economy and such?
Yes. So I would say, it's really anchoring into firstly the identity, really gaining that clarity
Mm-hmm.
that you are the entrepreneur who has weathered the storm.
Yeah.
That is crucial rather than seeing yourself and feeling yourself as someone who is vulnerable and, oh my goodness, what if this happens and what if that happens?
Mm-hmm.
So I think a big element comes from that.
Mm-hmm.
Another element that I think is really important that I talk about a lot is mindfulness and presence.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we go to the mindset area element,
Mm-hmm.
we've all got that voice in our head.
We do. We all
We've
do.
all got that voice in our
Yeah.
head that says, oh, but what if this doesn't happen? And what if and often it goes down the catastrophic route of,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. But when we observe it and observe that we're not that voice, that we
Mm-hmm.
have that voice,
Yeah.
then we can just become really present. And that is what I do with a lot of my clients. I had one, in fact, who the chairman of a board, and she was feeling a lot of pressure. And I
Mm-hmm.
took her through an exercise of just grounding, coming out of her head and feeling that inner energy field
Yep.
and connecting to that. And she felt this stillness and
Mm-hmm.
this peace. And also, then we did an exercise of exploring where this energy field ended. And she realized that actually she was very powerful. I mean, we're all more than just our mind and our body.
Yeah.
And and she reconnected to that sense of stillness.
Nice.
And I use, actually, it's just come to me as we're talking, I use a metaphor of a decanter,
Okay.
which is, if we have a decanter with an old bottle of wine in there, if
Mm-hmm.
someone comes in and brings us a new bottle of wine, we're not going to tip it into the old wine. What we're going to do is we're going to empty out the old wine,
To make space.
clean the decanter, make it empty and still, and then pour in the new wine. And I think of that like our identity and this voice. The old wine is the old voice going, "Oh, Nadia, what happens if this doesn't work?" And
Yeah.
Nadia, are you really the founder? Clear that out. By becoming present, we return to that place of stillness,
Mm-hmm.
the clean decanter. And then from that place of the deep, clean decanter,
Mm-hmm.
we then start to bring in that new
You have
identity,
space. Yeah.
upgraded identity of Nadia, the successful, super successful founder.
Mm-hmm.
And we start to really think about some of the more empowering beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I think, can be a great way. So if I go back to your question about how do we weather these uncertain times, I'd say identity and I'd say presence
Presence.
is a
Yeah.
big part.
Yeah. A lot of people, I'm a mother of four, and even when they were at one point, three of them were under the age of 5 and
Wow.
working full time. Question I get a lot: how do you do it?
Yes.
The presence was key. If I am in that particular moment with my family, I'm with my family. If I am, at work, I'm at work. And I set up systems that took care of other stuff around me to the support system that allows for that presence. And it was key. It gives you quality time. You get so much done. And you reduce that worry because you already have systems in place to help you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And something else that's coming to me is when we ground in the stillness and we're noticing sensations and our mind isn't jabbering,
Mm-hmm.
actually what we find is we receive inspirational ideas. I mean, how many times when you're in the shower and you're in the moment and enjoying, that's when you get the inspiration. It's not when
Yeah.
your the voice is going.
Yeah,
So
it's same thing for me. It's on my walks.
yeah,
It's early in the morning, first thing when I wake up. I always have a notebook right next to my bed because that's where those clouds, I call them the thinking clouds, when they collide from different areas that I'm an expert in, that's where innovation happens. And I draw it down so it doesn't take space
yes.
and then overcrowd, the decanter as you mentioned.
Mm.
So, and that helps a lot. That brings me to a question. Any,
Well, can I actually? I've got
sure, go ahead.
one more
Sure.
thought,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is, another thing I do a lot of is challenge assumptions. We're always limited or liberated by the assumptions we hold.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when there are challenging times, that is the time to really, again, put the mirror up and say,
Mm-hmm.
what am I assuming about this climate, about this situation?
Yeah.
Because let's face it, people during COVID, during recessions where things were tough, people
Yeah.
made a lot of money. They created really amazing
It,
businesses.
mm-hmm.
So they challenged the assumption that it was hard.
Yeah.
And I believe that challenging assumptions is one of the most powerful things
Mm-hmm.
as a founder and a business owner that we can do. And that helps us really break through those uncertain times and move into the sphere of possibility.
Yeah. That brings me to my next observation. This time around this like downturn economy, it's a great opportunity for business because a lot of people they will be in that mindset of holding on, taking less risk, not spending their cash, not taking on new projects and so on. If you have that mindset that this is a great opportunity, it's an awesome time to grow your business, to think outside the box, to see it instead of a storm as an opportunity, to find the problems out there that you alone can solve and make a business out of that.
Absolutely. And what I'd add on to that is when you found that really worthy problem, it's communicating it then in an inspirational way that helps people join the dots to what's possible. And
Exactly. Hmm.
and as you so rightly said, often in downtimes, people are laid off and so there's a lot of amazing talent out there.
Yes.
So when you have this worthy problem, you're painting the picture of what's possible.
Possibilities.
You're inspiring them as to, wow, I could be part of that. And
Mhm.
you could form a really amazing team to help you move your company forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree about becoming a magnet. And it amplifies things that when you are overthinking
Mm,
things and seeing obstacles instead of opportunities,
yes.
you're almost wasting your energy and working against yourself. I'm going to share an example that's relevant to the audience here. I have an amazing network on LinkedIn, including Tracy, and we had this. It was a conversation like the conversation we're having today about how can we amplify our voices and helping many entrepreneurs and business owners. It was through a DM say, hey, are you up to doing a half day conference? Within a couple hours, all 5 people I reached out to agreed to participate. It's going to help so many people. It's going to amplify our voices and make more impact.
Mm-hmm.
The lineup for next week's conference for entrepreneurs to give them an edge and equip them not only with visibility, public speaking, leadership, and Tracy will be presenting on how you lead yourself, and another Jill's will be doing how you lead others. I will be doing entrepreneurial essentials, and David, who has turned around 125 businesses, will share his experience on how to grow businesses. This gives you an example. Once you reconnect with that deep level, once you move from transactional, you know, um, um, relationships to longer term, a deeper level with people that align with your vision, it's really powerful.
I agree, and I think when you align and when you focus on impact, I think that's where the magic happens.
Exactly, exactly. So, in terms for you work mainly with visionary leaders and so on, and it gets lonely at the top. What are the main observations or problems that you see the clients you help face?
Yeah, it does get lonely at the top. And I think that's where having a thinking partner, that's how I like to think of myself. Someone who is objective and who can stimulate your thinking. I
Mm-hmm.
don't go in to give solutions. I'm very much in there to help people come up with their own ideas and grow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is one really key way. Another way is building your team,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely crucial. And we mentioned when we were talking about this event that we were going to talk about trust.
Yeah.
I think that leads us beautifully onto that. I think if you have a senior leadership team that you really trust, where you are really aligned, that helps you grow, and it helps you share. I'm going to use the word burden. I'm not sure that's right. Share the weight and get people moving behind you and giving you the energy. But I think the key word there is to build trust so that you feel that connection and you know that the dialogue is going to be fruitful. So
That's
I would say get someone like a coach, a thinking partner,
mhm.
um, and build a senior leadership team.
Yeah. And
Around.
yeah, I learned the hard way that trust is very, very important in terms of team building and in terms of keeping those long term relationships. There is no such a thing as under communication. Don't assume.
Completely agree.
And yeah, most of the problems happen if there is like that gray zone that gives leaves room for interpretation.
Mm.
So I know vulnerability as a leader is also powerful
Yeah.
in leading self. How do you balance? Because I've struggled with that myself. How do you balance, being vulnerable and still being, a leader that people look up to?
I think the word that comes to me, or the term that comes to me, is strategic vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's being mindful of areas that do connect. So let me just give you an example. I think that where leaders can be strategically vulnerable is in a group where you've got a big challenge that is a stretch, that everyone knows is a stretch. And it's being vulnerable to say, I don't know the answer. But what I do know is that together we can figure this out. So there you're showing that you're trusting the team. And what you can also add there is what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions that are just going to get us to think. Because ultimately it's about you igniting their thinking, igniting and expanding their thinking. Um, I think also another strategic vulnerability can be talking about mistakes, certain mistakes that you've made that actually help your team to realize that making mistakes is part of the journey of growth,
Yeah.
and of innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And it also then inspires and provides that psychological safety to the team that, you know what, we are going to move out of our comfort zone. And sometimes we might trip over, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And I always say to the leaders, it's about thinking about it like a ship and thinking, what are the mistakes that are going to sink the ship, and what are going to be the mistakes that are just going to get the ship to wobble a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
And being mindful, sharing the ones where there were learnings, where there was insights,
Mm-hmm.
and getting people to realize let's go out of our comfort zone. So
Awesome.
I think those are just a couple of ways I would.
Yeah. One example that came to mind that brings ties nicely the trust, the vulnerability, and the transparency is by the CEO at NVIDIA, which is one a couple weeks ago. It became $1 trillion company with
Wow.
with a T, not a B.
Yeah.
Early in their journey, when they were early on, they had this contract to develop a product, and it didn't work out. They had all their eggs in that basket. And he approached the VC. He said, "We had this contract to work on this product. It didn't work out. If we don't get paid, we're going to have to, go bankrupt." They paid for that contract without the product because they trusted the team, because he was vulnerable enough to admit that there was a mistake. He wasn't trying to cover it. Few, couple decades later, they're $1 trillion company.
Amazing. And I think there's the intentionality about building trust. And if
Mm-hmm.
we go back to the uncertain times, that's another thing I encourage leaders to do, is to be intentional about deepening the roots of trust.
Exactly.
And actually, if we share the screen,
Sure.
Nadia, that I've got a slide here, a little bit here. This is a model, a Stephen Covey model, which talks about what he thinks are the components of trust. And he says that there are two main areas. One is competency and one is character.
Mm-hmm.
And competency tends to be the most logical one, shall we
Yeah.
say. And maybe this comes back to some of the misconceptions that
I
you
was thinking the same. We are on the same wavelength here.
exactly. So, people want to feel trust in others when they see results, they see a track record, they see
Yeah.
that credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like in the case of the leader who said, "I don't know the answer, but we can figure it out together."
Yeah.
They're showing the skills and the ability and saying, "Let's tap into the knowledge that we do have." So that's where you're being strategic. You're tapping into some of these areas.
Mm-hmm.
But the bit I love, and I think this is the biggest misconception, is that it's all about results. And
Yeah.
I don't think it is. My view is, and this is what Stephen Covey says, is that the character part is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
And two of the areas, well, I love all of the areas, but two that I really pick up on with clients is saying, a key thing is to be clear on your intent, your intention.
Mm-hmm.
We can go through difficult times.
Yeah.
We can have challenges. We can make mistakes. Then we're being honest. But we're also showing that our intention, and the most powerful, the type of intention that is the most powerful to build trust, is when there's a mutual benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're going into a situation and you're explaining, "Listen, I'm in this for a win-win.
Yeah.
I want the best for you and I want the best for me."
Mm-hmm.
Shoulders drop, don't you, when you
Yeah,
hear
you
that?
do. Yeah.
Oh, God, that feels good. And then when you add in the element of caring about your employees, especially in uncertain times,
Yeah.
because they're going to be feeling unstable.
Yeah.
And what I say to my clients also, when they're the really visionary ones going after something disruptive, is you're going to be hiring people that are top in their field, very high on the right side.
Yeah.
But remember, they're high achievers. that little gremlin, the fear of failure is coming out and going, oh my goodness. And you're going into a new area. They're not going to know all the answers.
Yeah.
So we need to do a metaphorical hug. We need to care for them and show them it's okay. How are you feeling? It's normal to feel unsettled when we're trying things that no one has ever tried before.
Yeah.
So
That is awesome. And it ties nicely back to innovation as a big competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Because it amplifies that, especially there are 4 types of innovation. The ones with the highest risk are the breakthrough innovations.
Yeah.
And those innovative team, they would need a special environment that and systems that tolerate failure because it's part of the process. So in many companies, their research and development and breakthrough teams, they're not evaluated against the same thing for the rest of their, within their company because, excuse me, as a leader, you need to set up those expectations, those benchmarks that failure is part of the process.
And actually, Nadia, that brings me on to
Oh, I love that one. I was thinking the Simon Sinek.
the Simon Sinek. We can play it in a minute, but actually, what you've just said ties to this Patrick Lencioni model.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
he talks about the fact that we need to create trust, because if we don't have trust, then we don't have discussion. We don't have positive conflict.
Yeah.
And then we don't have people buying in because they don't feel heard. Then there's lack of accountability and lack of results.
Yeah.
But when we flip it on its head and actively build trust, then we can create positive, healthy debate, healthy conflict, where people feel heard. When they feel heard, then they're going to say, okay, I've had my opinion heard. We're making this decision. I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to be accountable, and I'm going to drive towards results.
Mm-hmm. That brings me to the environment, psychological safety. As a leader, how do you set that up so people feel, safe enough to speak up, to be trusting their teammate, to trust their leader, and so on?
Beautiful. And I was actually just going to say 2 of the elements that we need to do in building this trust is provide the environment and the condition and the dynamics. One of it, I'll come to your question in just 1 minute. One of the elements we can follow is to deepen understanding. Again, understanding of self, so we understand the impact we're having, because sometimes we don't realize that maybe our body language is very strong. I see that in a blind spot on the Enneagram, where people see a blind spot might be intimidating, and they're like, oh, Tracy, that's not me. I'm like, well, maybe. And actually, when they realize that it is a blind spot, they can then own that impact. So understanding self, understanding each other, understanding the market, that's the absolute pivotal basis. The other ingredient is exactly what you've just said, Nadia. It's building psychological safety. And this takes a lot of intentionality and true leadership. True leadership to intentionally, let me go back, to intentionally create, be clear about the intent, that it is a win-win, that they are safe, that we want them to come up with ideas, that no idea is a bad idea. Every idea is going to lead to potentially another breakthrough. So you're being very, very clear and transparent. You then need to make sure that if you've said it, you follow through. That there's integrity, there's alignment between your what you're saying and what you're doing.
Yeah, that brings me to how do you balance when you're recruiting, for instance, and growing your company, character versus competence, like trust versus competence. And that brings me to Simon Sinek, that famous example.
I've got that here. Do you want me to play it?
Sure. You want to do it? Yeah.
I've got it. Just a minute here. I love it. So this, just to set the context, this is, here we're seeing what Stephen Covey's saying so beautifully. There's character and there's competency. And I think Simon let's see if, do you know what? I'm wondering.
We can go through the example. We can talk about it.
is not going to play, is it, from this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what he says is that there are the two axes. So the example he gives is that he works with the Navy SEALs.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to them, how do you define who are the people that you take on your critical missions?
Yep.
And they describe that they look at it in terms of performance, obviously, performance and trust.
Yep.
And he describes it as performance on the battlefield and off the battle, or on the battlefield and off the battlefield. And in their words, he says, the performance on the battlefield is, are you going to save me? And am I safe with my life?
Yeah.
And trust is, or am I safe with, will you be safe with my money and my wife?
Yeah, exactly.
And he makes the pun of course, they're Navy SEAls. But
Mm-hmm.
there we're showing they're valuing both sides. And what he says is, of course, what we don't want is the low performance person of low trust.
Yep.
What we ideally want is the high performance, high trust.
Mm-hmm.
What we also don't want is the high performance, low trust. But actually, what we're prepared to have more of is the medium performance,
Mm-hmm. High trust.
Trust is the key, and trust is character side on the Stephen Covey model.
Yeah, that's.
And I always say, Nadia, to founders when they're hiring, hire the attitude, train the skill.
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to make sure there's value alignment. You want to make sure you're going to trust them. That you've got someone who is inspired by your vision, wants to be part of that impact.
Yeah.
And then, sure, you can definitely get people with skill who match that, but you've got to have both. And I think it's just essential. I see a lot of people, they go, let's just hire the skill. And then that's what then ripples down. It breaks the culture.
Yeah.
And that's going to trip you up.
Yeah, I see a lot of that pattern of highly skilled people, but there is a disconnect between the skill level and the leadership level. And that's when you try to kind of promote people, and that's where you start having problems in cultural, clashes and what have you. It doesn't work. So leadership is very, very important, and use itself.
Yes, and I think also it comes back to one of the other misconceptions, which I think within it, are leaders born or made? And actually, I think they're a bit of both. There are clearly some people who are natural born leaders. But I do also believe that leadership can be taught. And there is awareness of self and an awareness of understanding what makes a good leader. And that just, I use this multiplier model where I don't have it here, but I talk around multipliers who extract and expand potential, or diminishers who are diminishing, shutting down the potential. And there are fundamental mindset shifts around them. The diminishers, maybe without realizing it, are coming from the perspective of, I know everything, you're just going to do what I say, which is again a misconception that it's all about the leader giving the answers. Whereas the multiplier goes, I might have the answers, but I know that together we're going to create an even better answer. And so they're coming from the mindset and assumption of, we'll figure it out together and we're stronger together. And then when you overlay that mindset, you start to, and you're coming from there, you start to say, okay, what do I then do? And ask the question. I'm listening, which some people can find really difficult. I'm just creating that space.
That space, that safe space. Yeah.
And that silence where people can think and those light bulbs can go on.
Yeah. That brings me to one example that few companies that did that successfully, the 4-day work week, and they have a thinking day.
Yes.
Most of the innovations, like Google, a lot of their products, they came from that one day off, that you can do whatever you want that can bring some value to the company. No strings attached. 3M, the sticky notes that we all use, they were created through that one day of thinking. So creating that space to stop and think and be present and just get out of the box
Completely.
is very powerful if you are to lead innovative teams for growth.
Absolutely. And again, that takes an intentionality, doesn't it? It takes, that can be learned.
It does. I believe leaders can be trained.
I
If you put your
100%
mind
agree.
to anything and make it a priority, be
Yeah,
intentional about it, and be proactive about it, because anything that you want to achieve, you need to prioritize, to seek professional help. You can do it.
yeah,
A lot of technical people, they are able to find information,
absolutely.
perhaps better than us, but time is the most expensive currency we have. So if you have a way to compact your
Mhm.
learning with a professional, it's worth every penny.
Mhm.
So for the audience here, if you would like to get in touch with Tracy for anything that's leadership related, you can send her a direct message on LinkedIn. And we tapped into a little bit about the misconceptions. Shall we go over the misconceptions?
Absolutely,
Time,
Nadia. We love
time
those.
flies. We have like 7 more minutes. So
Yes,
are you up for it to do some
I'm up
fire
for it.
check?
And
Fire check.
if I can just say on the DM, you're very welcome to send me a DM. I'm happy to set up a complimentary session. I've also got a great guide on how to to develop a leadership, a multiplier mindset as well.
Mhm.
So I can send you the link to that. I'm
Yeah,
open to whatever works for you.
absolutely. Yeah. So she's a go-to person in leading self. So if you
Thank
need help, you're a leader in that area and need help in that area, I encourage you to get in touch with Tracy.
thank
So
you.
let's do some fireside style, bust some misconceptions about leadership. First one, leadership is primarily about leading others. What's your rebuttal to that,
And
Tracy?
I think it resonates with what we've been saying,
Mm-hmm.
that actually it does start with you, because you are the one that then has the impact on others. And it takes us being intentional about leading ourselves. And as we've said, understanding ourselves, upgrading our identity, and really deepening those roots that I showed in the tree.
That's awesome.
So 100%.
I don't have time to focus on me, and I'm guilty of this one.
Oh my goodness, I think most people are guilty. Most people are guilty of it. Or again, people are thinking, I also hear, no, I need to focus my attention and my money on other people. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but actually when you start with yourself, that's the key. And what we see, I have examples of leaders who have founders who have worked on their leadership and their identity and their mindset, and they've 10x their results. They wouldn't have 10x the results had they not done that.
Yeah,
And others who have in, opened their increased, upgraded their identity, and they've started to aim even higher
even higher.
because their previous identity and mindset was restricting them.
Mm-hmm.
So my view is you don't have time not to, especially
Yeah,
you're someone who wants to make an impact, who wants to
exactly.
create,
Yeah. I
results.
think of that in a way people will say, this is going to cost me a lot. I rebuttal this. How much does it cost you if you don't take action? If you're going for years at the 1x versus doing the 10x within 5 years.
Yeah. And actually, if you pivot that even more to saying, yes, there is often a cost, but rather than, an amount of money exchanged,
Mm-hmm.
it's not looking at it as a cost, but looking at what's the ROI, what's the
The
return on
return.
investment,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly. And what's the opportunity cost? If you
And,
get
and
that
the
out of the
opportunity,
way, you can focus on bigger things.
yeah.
All
And I
right, our
think
next.
also, the other thing I often think I get people to think about is their 80th or their 90th birthday. What is it that they in their heart really want to have achieved?
Yeah,
And actually, if what you don't want is to have regrets
yeah,
or
exactly.
an amount of money, which in the relative scheme of things is
That's
pittance,
mm-hmm.
that will enable you to have that sense of fulfillment, to be that role model to your children, to create an impact in the world,
Mm-hmm.
which is transformational.
Yeah. And I agree that regret is heavier, way heavier than any fear. So
100%.
if you're scared of doing something, go for it because you don't want to be 80 years old looking back
Mm.
with that heavy regret not taking action when you could have.
And I think also, Nadia, when you look at the fear, the fear is that voice in your head,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes from fear of the unknown and uncertainty. But actually, what I find is that when people work with me, they understand how they work. They understand that they're creating. I talk
Mm-hmm.
to them about quantum physics and the observer effect, and we go into depth. They have an understanding, so they're moving forward with certainty and conviction.
Yeah.
And I was on a call earlier and we were talking about conviction, and I was saying three of the pillars I work around are clarity, who are you being, what is it you
Yeah.
want, that your proposition, and
Mm-hmm.
then conviction in yourself, in your team, in your product. That's what's game changing.
Mm-hmm.
And then trust. So I think that all of these elements give you the certainty to move forward, and that helps dissolve any fear that you might have.
That's awesome. Our next one, mindset is secondary to strategy and execution. Mindset is fixed and it's time consuming and it's very unnecessary.
Yeah. And I think, the work of Carol Dweck has really shown the power of the growth mindset. And I mean, I see it
Mm-hmm.
in action the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And, our results are going to be a reflection of our identity and our mindset. So when we shift, that's going to have the ripple effect. And my view is that strategy and execution are important.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, but it's going to be far more impactful when you start at the source, and then the mindset, the vision, the strategy become even more impactful, and the energy behind the action is a lot stronger.
That's awesome. Our next one, leadership is based on authority and it's about control and dominance.
Yeah, I mean, my view is that leads to the diminishers, the type of leaders who are really only extracting about 30, 40, 50% of their team members. So if you think an easy number, if you're paying them 100K and you're working from that approach, you're probably getting 50,000 pounds worth of their value. But when you shift to an environment that's the multiplier, where you're asking questions, you're providing that psychological safety,
Mm-hmm.
actually people grow, and studies have been done to show that people are saying, "My goodness, I didn't realize I could do that." They are going over and above what they thought. So if we look at it in terms of numbers, let's say they've expanded the potential. They're now getting 120% of what they originally were getting. And
Yeah,
look at that ROI, you're paying them 100, but you're getting 100, at least 120 worth of value. And it's not just about looking at it in a monetary point of view. It's also saying that employee goes home happy. That employee
too.
comes
Mhm.
in with innovation and feels that growth and feels part of something.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you kind of, when you are leading not with, dominance and micromanagement, people will show up at 150 instead of getting at best 50% out of them.
But it
Uh,
starts with you again, Nadia. It starts with your
exactly.
type of leadership and realizing that how you're showing up either ripples negatively or positively.
That's awesome. Next one is, hold on, let me save the best for last. And hold on a second, one more. Oh, the next one is, if you like this, you can follow me and Tracy on LinkedIn. And if you are a leader, a visionary leader who needs help to with self leadership so you can amplify your impact and grow your business, you can send a direct message, contact Tracy directly on LinkedIn. And I was going to share one more thing that we've put together, if you don't mind, Tracy.
Cool.
Uh, about next week's event.
Yes,
So people
absolutely.
can come and learn from 6 leaders that have over 100 years of experience
It
in their
might even be
respective
double that, Nadia, might
com-
be said.
what's that?
It might even be double, might even be over
I
200.
was being conservative. I want to show like say that we have very very experienced leaders in
Yeah,
this conference. One, two, David and Maria, they will tap into how you grow your brand and how you master your public speaking, so you can be clear in your messaging, increase your visibility. Tracy will be talking, expanding on leading self, and Jills will expand on leading teams for high performance. I will tap into essentials for entrepreneurship. And David Wolf, we have a weekly show for entrepreneurs and founders. He's turned around 125 businesses and he will talk about business growth. You do not want to miss this event. And I'll go back to our stream here. If you are, a founder, an entrepreneur, need help with leadership, I highly encourage you to follow, connect with Tracy on LinkedIn. And with that, time flies when we're having a good time.
it really does. And
Yeah,
Nadia, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for just the most wonderful conversation. I love talking about leadership, and as you say, the hour has completely flown by. So
oh, it
I really
just went by
appreciate
so quick. I'm like, oh my God,
it.
it's past the clock already. Thank you so much, Tracy. This
Thank
has
you.
been a blast. It
Yes,
seems like a conversation rather than
exactly.
an interview, and it felt natural. It flowed so well, and that speaks to how easy you are to work with.
Thank you. And if I can just leave one final remark for people, very much when people approach me on LinkedIn, I don't go in to sell. I'm very much around adding value. For me, it's around connection
Yeah,
and really having an exploratory conversation where you are going to get value. That is my heartfelt intention. So just wanted to leave that because I know a lot of people, if they feel they're going to send a message, feel, oh my goodness, I'm going to be salty. I
hmm,
promise you, you
yeah.
won't be salty.
I'm of that same mindset that you get way more value in building long-term relationships when you lead with that giving mindset. When you are, an amplifier, that when you bring value to people, people would need multiple touch points. But it's a journey. It's a journey for you. It's a journey for them. And when you find that alignment, that's where the magic happens.
It really does.
Awesome.
And you are just a great role model on that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you. So
No,
if you are, yeah, again, get in touch with Tracy. She's the best in her class. She's in the class of one. So, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions or watching the replay, you can type them in the chat. We'll check back, in the coming few days and see if you have any questions. Thank you for your time again, and I will see you next week.
thank you. Take care.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.